Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you to the 25th lecture on the course Management, Organizational Policies and Practices. Let's have a quick recap of what we did in lecture 24. So in that lecture we had a discussion on the different business level strategies, and we started off with the help of the Porter's strategy clock, wherein he explains different strategies that at the business unit level, different organizations and different business units they can adopt. We started off with a distinction between the what can be constituted as a strategic business unit and what cannot be constituted as a strategic business unit. What is a pitfall when it comes to demarcation between one business unit to the other business unit, and what are the different criteria that the firm can use to classify its different business units as the different strategic business units. Then we saw that how the different firms, some of the firms, they adopt this price-based strategies, and in which they need to have this low cost and they compete on the basis of the low prices. And then we discussed the strategy of the differentiation, which again has two categories of differentiation. One is the broad-based differentiation that we discussed, in which there is a slightly higher price for the product and with a better quality, right? And it is targeted as at a large group of people. And then we had a discussion on the niche differentiation, in which the differentiation is on the basis of the very high quality products, and for which the very premium prices charged, or very high prices charged, and it is basically for a very small group of people. So the target market for this kind of strategy is a very small group of people. Then we had a discussion on the hybrid strategies, that how the hybrid strategy of a firm, when it especially the firms that are new entrants into the market, or they want to enter a new market, they mostly they adopt this kind of strategy in which both the price is kept lower and the quality is improved, right? So they have the features of both the price-based strategies and the differentiated strategies. And then we had a discussion on the different tips and tricks to survive these different the competitive advantage based on these strategies. That if a firm is using the low cost strategy, what are the different factors that are very critical for the firm to sustain its competitive advantage basing on the low cost strategy. So the firms, they cannot, for example, face the price wars from their competitors if they don't have the low cost base. So in the short run they may be able to compete those price wars by also reducing their product prices, but in the long run they would be run out of business if they don't have a low cost base, right? So for the low cost strategies, the firms, they really need to have low cost base, because otherwise they won't be left with much money to make the reinvestments. The margins are already small in the low cost strategies, right? So if you need to have a low cost base at all the levels in your production process, and in order to produce at lower costs, right? So then we discussed the different factors that can make the differentiation strategy sustain over a period of time. And we also saw that in hyper competitive circumstances, or in hyper competition, the firms, it's difficult to keep in the state of equilibrium for a long period of time because of that turbulent environment, and because of the fast changes and the shortened product life cycles. The firms, they soon lose their competitive advantage, or their core competencies. They might become their redundancies after some period of time when the product life cycle has expired. So the firms, they need to constantly upgrade and upscale them. Then we also had a discussion of the lock-in, that how lock-in is created and what are the different conditions of a lock-in. Then we had a discussion on the different diversification strategies that have that the business units or the organization it can employ, right? So it can be the related diversification or it can be the unrelated diversification, and we saw that this concept of diversification is basically firms diversify or they enter into related diversification because they want to reap an edge from the economies of scope, because they have the similar human resources and they have the similar physical resources and they have the similar processes, so they try to enter into the products which are related to their existing product lines, so so that they can make use of those their existing assets and their existing products and their existing assets, both physical and human, and utilizing those assets they can bring in new products, new related products into the consumer good markets, right? Such as the P&G is doing or the Unilever is doing. So so that is the related diversification, and we saw that how it is related to performance because of the creation of the synergies, right? And but the firm, it needs to have very strong management skills in order to cope up with the different issues of this related diversification, because unless and until synergies are created, it's not going to be much value, and it might be difficult to handle this diversification for the firms. And because of this reason, many organizations are now not entering into diversification, whether related or unrelated. We also studied the concept of the unrelated diversification, in which the product line is not similar to your existing product line, therefore you are competing into entirely different markets, into entirely different products. You are offering entirely different products, and it depends whether you have the necessary resources to enter into those new markets. So the firms, they do that mainly when they feel that their existing product cycle that has expired, or they need to it's a requirement of the market that they need to enter into the new markets, or they enter into the new products, or there is demand for some other new products that they are not currently offering, and so on. There are a number of guidelines that when you can enter into the unrelated diversification, and we discussed them as well. Then we also had a discussion on the different intensive strategies that the firm uses, such as the market, that how it has to the efforts that the firm or the organization it uses to develop itself, right? That can be through by way of consolidation, in which you are reducing your number of units, or you're reducing your structure, right? And then and that happens when you feel that the demand for some of your products or demand is reducing, so you also reduce the number of customers, or you reduce the number of units or the number of factories of the organization, etc. You consolidate basically in order to also reduce your costs and stay profitable, and put all your resources in the products that are successful, right? So that is consolidation. Then we had a discussion on the other strategies that the firms have to develop themselves or to grow, which are the market penetration, in which you keep with the existing product in the existing market. Then we discussed the market development, in which you enter into the new markets, and we discussed the product development, in which you bring in new products, right? Or you make some changes in the existing product, to develop your existing product, or you bring in a new product, you make a new product. So they are the different intensive strategies that the firm can have. So these are all the different strategies that we discussed during our earlier cycle. Then we also had a discussion on the integration strategies, and we saw that the firm has the option of this forward integration, in which it tries to have control over the distributors and the retailers, right, by doing the starting off cutting off from their services, and trying to build its own capacity to replace the distributors and the retailers, reduce its dependence on those, and develop on these areas themselves. Like I gave you the example of the auto manufacturers when they entered into the insurance business as well, providing insurance and the auto after sales repair and the services. When they started off to provide that kind of services, so that was they in their attempt to bypass the retailers and the distributors, and building that capacity themselves on their own, which remained an unsuccessful move on the part of the many automobile manufacturers. Then we had a discussion on the backward integration, in which you try to control over the raw materials and the supplies, etc., right, by building them by building them by yourself. So these are the two forms of the vertical integration. And then we also had a discussion of the horizontal integration, in which you try to have control over your competitors, right, and that is because the firms, they know that they can gain innumerable advantages of the monopolies by doing that. Then we summed up this lecture, which was on all these different strategies, and we discussed the implications of these different strategies for the managers. They need to understand the business units in which they are operating, how that business unit is strategic, what is a target market, what is their strategic customers, and how their strategy needs to be aligned with their goals and with the different policies that the firm makes. So we ended up our session on the discussion of the different goals of the firm, or at the level of the different departments, and the different policies that the organization can make. So there need to be a good alignment between these. So today we'll be discussing the concept of organizational change management and the implications of the organizational change, the resistance to change for the managers. So the learning goals are first, after listening to this lecture, you should be able to understand what are the different forces of change, what is planned versus unplanned change, what is resistance to change, how to overcome that resistance to change, what are the different approaches to managing change, and these different approaches we'll be discussing. One, the Lewin's 3-step change model, and the other one we'll be discussing Porter's 8-step plan for implementing change. Then we'll be discussing organizational development, and we'll be seeing that how a culture for change it can be created, and we'll be seeing the two different possibilities, one the innovation and the other one the learning organization. So the different forces for change, why change is imperative, why it is important for firms to change, right? What are the different factors that influence or that make it a requirement for the firms to change? So we have the different factors in our macro environment that force us to change. So one is the nature of the workforce. So the nature of the workforce, we know that it is changing very dramatically because of a number of trends that we can observe. One, the mobility of labor, right? The labor is becoming increasingly mobile. The organizational boundaries are blurred. So now we can see that increasingly the workforce or the employees, they tend to change their jobs very frequently, moving from one organization to the other organization. It is often heard now than it was heard a few decades ago. So a few decades ago, the employees who joined one organization, they used to stay in those organizations for a lifetime, right? And the concept of changing the organization or switching to another organization was not common even in the era of our fathers. But now this change is very commonly observed. People, they change organizations very often. The mobility of labor has increased. The organizational boundaries have blurred. People increasingly feel responsible, that they are themselves responsible for their career development, and they are themselves responsible for exploring the opportunities, the different opportunities in the labor market. So therefore they are more mobile now. They are more aware now of the different possibilities, different opportunities. And then we know that the advertisements, they are also done by companies increasingly online. It's now all the information that is available on the company websites, right? And people can apply online for the different jobs, and they can get the calls through emails, and so the whole process is very much smooth, and it's possible to do everything online now. So that all these factors, they are increasing basically the mobility of labor. So mobility of labor is not increased only at the level of the nations, but also the geographical boundaries have also blurred, which means that now it's easier for the labor to move from one country to another country as well. So increasingly we can see that people are coming around here and there for jobs, right? So we have signed into different blogs and the different employment websites which provide us constant informations and constant emails, alerts, showing that these jobs are available internationally, right? And so it's the information sharing has become very common because of the widespread use of the internet and the online and the virtual communication systems, right? As a result, the international mobility of labor has also significantly increased, right? So this also has the consequences for the division of this workforce, right? So the workforce is more diverse, right, compared to it was earlier. Right now you can see that more and more people in the organizations from the different backgrounds, from the different races and from different sexes, the female representation is significantly increasing, right? And the concept of the dual careers that has increased, wherein females, they are also responsible for running the house, and a female and along with her male counterpart, they are both running their household expenses. So there is increasing acceptability for working women, and their proportion in the labor force is increased a lot, right? And similarly, the people from the different religions, sexes and castes, they are also representing the working population now. Then there is aging population, right? We see that there are increasingly the demographic statistics or the labor force statistics. It shows that the graying population in the labor force, that is increasing, right? Because of the falling birth rates, there are not as much young entrants into the labor market, and as much there are the old people. So the graying, there is phenomenon of the graying people in the workforce as well, right? And then there are a few technological changes as well that are forcing the organizations to change. We know that the faster and cheaper and more mobile computers are available now than they were a decade ago. So the rate of change in which this technological development is taking place is tremendous, and also not only the technological development, but also this improvement in technology is also bringing down the costs, right? So the computers, they are available for very cheap now, and all the technology that is available for very cheap now, and its prices, they constantly fall and they drastically fall. And then there is this online music sharing and this deciphering of the human genetic code. So these are the changes in the technological environment. So the technological innovations, they are making the products obsolete on one hand, and they are also on the other hand, they are posing different requirements for the organizations. So organizations, they constantly need to adapt those technological innovations. They need to bring them into their organizations in order to stay in business. So if some of the organizations, they are still doing their businesses manually, they have not adapted to the new technology, to the new computer systems, and the new ways of doing things. Those organizations, they have left behind, such as the difference between the online banking and the traditional banking. So the banks who are still offering the traditional banking services and not the online banking services, they have significantly, their market share has reduced compared to the banks who have entered into the online services for the customers, right? So they are using more electronic ways, and they're using more advanced technology, and they're offering those services to their customers, wherein the customers can do the business online at their home or in their offices or anywhere. They don't need to visit the bank or the branches for making transactions, such as for checking their bank account statement, or they're checking their balance, or for making any debit credit transactions. They can even make those transactions internationally, right? Any transfer transactions, etc. there are a number of options that are available now to the customers, which make that banking very much easier for them and very attractive for them. Then the economic shocks, rise and fall of the dot-com stocks and the economic recession, then we have the record low interest rates. So these all have the implications for the organizations, right? And then we have the competition, such as there's global competitors, and we know that as a result of the globalization, the markets, the boundaries between the geographical boundaries between the markets, that is also blurred. There are now global consumers, there are global customers, there are global clients, there are global distributors, there are global suppliers, and there are global competitors, right? Because if one organization, it is heavily relying on in outsourcing its manufacturing services to some low cost or to some low priced labor country such as India or China, of course it has implications for its competitor as well. If the competitor will also not do so, if it will also not outsource the cheap labor from the developing country, or if it also not start its plant in the developing country where it can take advantage of the low cost raw material and the low cost labor and the technology and the low cost technology, then that will be left behind. It's his or her competitor, right? So this is how the changes in the global market, they are influencing the organizations, right? And this globalization is one of the driving force behind this globalization is the e-commerce as well. Right, and because of the e-commerce, the online possibilities of the trade, the online customers, they can purchase and they can make orders online, sitting in one part of the world from another part of the world. Therefore, there is no boundary anymore, right? And again, there is the organizations, they are producing in so many parts of the world. They are outsourcing one activity from one part of the world where that is cheaper, outsourcing another part or another unit of their product from another part of the world, and so on, that it becomes difficult to say that where that product actually belongs to, what is the origin of that product. It becomes difficult to say. So these are the different changes in the international market which are basically forcing the organizations to change. Then we have the social trends, as I explained to you earlier, that the tastes of the consumers, they are converging, right? And as a result of the convergence in the tastes of the consumers, again, there are implications for the organizations. The organizations now have different avenues, they have different target markets, they have different challenges to tap the target market. Then there are these internet chat rooms, there is retirement of the baby boomers, and there is rise in discount and big box retailers. Then we have the world politics, that how it is affecting the organizations, what happened after the 9/11 attacks, right? How the US imposed sanctions on the developing countries, how it imposed sanctions on Pakistan after, what were the consequences of that kind of political changes on the organizations in Pakistan, on their quota systems, on their exports, on their trades, on their imports, and so on, right? And the opening of the Chinese of the markets in China, we know how it is leading the economy, world economy nowadays, how it is widespread in doing its business all over the globe, and what are the implications of the Chinese products in our markets, and so on. Then we see that these changes, that can be both planned and that can be unplanned in response to these forces that we discussed. So these were a number of forces that we discussed, that need, the firms need to respond to those forces. Otherwise, it will be a threat to the survival of a firm if it does not respond to those forces, right? So there are two kinds of changes that are possible. One are the planned changes, in which you plan for change, right? You make your strategy and then you make your plans accordingly, your policies accordingly, that how you have to bring about that change, right? And one is that planned change, right? And the other one is the unplanned change, which you have not planned, right? So planned change are the activities that are intentional and goal oriented, and the different goals of planned change: one is the improving the ability of the organization to adapt to the changes in the environment, and the other one is the changing the behavior of the individuals and groups in the organization. Of course, it's important to change the behavior of those individuals and the groups that are operating in the organization, because without bringing change in their behavior, if only bring some structural changes in the organization, if we change the processes in the organization, the machinery, the technology, etc., but we do not bring change in the behavior of the people, then that change is not going to be successful. Therefore, the planned change has two elements. One, you should bring in the improvement in your ability, in your capability, so that you can respond to the external environment, and second, you also need to change the behavior of the people. Change agents they are the people who bring change. So they can be anyone. They can be your managers, they can be non-managers, they can be employees themselves, or they can be any other outside agents such as the consultants, etc. Okay, then if we discuss about this plan, if I just told you that the change can also be unplanned, right? And an example of the unplanned change that can be, if I recall an example that was a real case in which some of the employees in a small hotel, they went to their manager, and one day in the morning, and they said to the manager that now they need more and more flexibility in their work because of the different challenges that they have in their homes, and it's not possible for them to work from 9 to 5, and they need some flex time so that they can also combine their family with their work, and they have the opportunity to work at home as well, right? Otherwise, if that is not possible, if that flex time is not possible, then they will be forced to leave the organization, and they will be forced to find some jobs in some other organization. So next day, the very next day, the hotel manager, he called on all the employees, and he announced that the flex time, right? This is the kind of the unplanned change by the manager. Manager had not planned to offer this time of this flex time facility for the employees, but it happened all of a sudden. And change is planned when you bring in a change in your strategy. You make your policies accordingly. For example, you need to do the process re-engineering, so you properly plan for that change. You take all the proper initiatives and steps to execute that change, and then you change the behaviors of the people in order to gain their commitment towards that change. So that is a planned change. There is a series of steps that you are taking in order to make certain things happen. The resistance to change, it can basically take various forms. One is the overt and immediate, in which when your manager is asking you to for a certain change, or for a certain change, and what you're responding is you don't like that change, and you are voicing your complaints, and there can be a number of ways in which you can show your reaction or show your resistance to change that are really overt and that are immediate, right? And they are not implicit. So you can immediately reduce or you can slow down your operations, you can go on strike, you can give the threats to go on strike, and so on. So your reactions are they're clear, right, and they're overt. There can be some change initiatives by the managers that are again not acceptable to the employees, and the employees are resistant to those changes proposed by the management, and the management implements those changes, but the employees sometimes they do not show the kind of reactions which are overt and immediate, but they kind of tend to keep silent. They don't respond much, or they don't give their feedback much, right? But they don't accept that change. So that is the case of your resistance to change, which is implicit and deferred. Herein, what happens is that in the long term, as a result of that resistance to change, the employees, they lose their motivation towards work, they lose their loyalty with the organization, with their work, and they are more prone to making more errors and mistakes because of their lack of engagement with the work, and it can also lead to increased absenteeism on account of being sick, right? So then this kind of changes that can occur, and in the long term, it would be these kind of changes, they surface in the employee attitudes and the employee behaviors. They are not explicit and they're not short term, so they surface with the passage of time, and when they surface, it might be difficult even for the managers to realize that these responses, they are a reaction to that change initiative that was taken some time back by the manager, because the employees, they did not explicitly stated that they are angry with this kind of change or they don't like this kind of change, and this is how their behavior would be like. So there are different sources of the individual sources of the resistance to change, and there are also some organizational sources of the resistance to change. So if we talk about the individual sources of the resistance to change, they are the habit of the individuals. Of course, they're habitual of doing certain things in certain ways. They're of following certain routines. They have their setup the norms of doing things, and they have set up their procedures and their daily work routines to do things, and they don't want to deviate from them. They feel comfortable with that. So this is just out of habit, that if I'm doing something by following one certain process, and now I'm asked to do it by following another process, so I will just not feel comfortable, because I'm so much habitual of doing it this way. So that can be a simple factor of that resistance to change. Then the security issues sometimes employees have when a certain change has come. So they might feel insecure of doing that new situation or to adapting. So it also depends on the self-efficacy of the individual. Some individuals who are more self-efficacious, in a new situation, they might be confident that they will also perform well in that situation. But certain individuals, they may not feel secure that they will be able to perform in certain other situation equally well. Then the economic factors are also there. They also drive the individuals' resistance to change, that how this change and how would be related to my performance and my productivity, and what consequences it would have for my income, for my salary, for my promotions, etc. Right? And especially when the performances, they are evaluated or when your outcomes, they are performance based on your salaries, etc. They are benefits, they are tied to the performance valuations specifically. Then the individuals, they have concern for these economic factors, that how their productivity is going to be affected by that change, and whether they will be that will be affected negatively or positively. Then the fear of the unknown, you just have the anxiety that what will happen. And the selective information processing is another factor, which is that we individuals, they always tend to passively select the information. Only they select and they process only that information or those cues with which they feel comfortable. So even if a manager is telling the employees that okay, this change is important, but the employees, they may gather the data from another angle which supports the status quo, or which supports the existing ways and norms and processes, etc., which does not support change, because they want to keep things going that way. So that is the selective information processing. Then there are factors in the organization that bring in this resistance to change, such as the structural inertia. Again, the organization, it has a certain ways and the processes and of doing things which are established for a long period of time. So this structural inertia is that when you are moving away from that change, so there is a change in your structure, and this inertia, it tries to bring the organization back to its original equilibrium position. Then there are the limited focus focus of change, right? When because we know that the organizations, they are in the organizations, there are different units, there are different departments, there are different groups that are producing, and if the change is to be brought in one particular group or in one particular unit, that change might be so small, because there's so much interdependency between the different units and groups, that they all need to change simultaneously to bring the change. So if that change is being brought in one particular group, that might be nullified by no change in the other groups or in the other units. Then the group inertia. So sometimes the norms in the group, they don't let the change happen, even if the individuals they want to change. Then there is this threat to expertise, that we know that the individuals who have the experience and the expertise, they it might be a threat to the expertise. Their expertise, they might become obsolete, and thus their competencies, they might become obsolete, and that brings in resistance to change. Then there is this threat of to established power relationships. Those power individuals who are at the power positions for a long period of time, this change, it might be a threat to them. It might affect their power positions because of the repositioning, because of the change in the organizational structure, and or because of a number of other possibilities that can arise as a result of the change. It might be a threat to their power positions, and again it might also be a threat to the resource allocations for the different departments, different individuals, different managers. The resources, they might be reallocated, and therefore the individuals, they might, some of the individuals, they might be afraid of losing the allocation, the favorable allocation of resources, right? And that as a result they might show resistance to change. So there are a number of tactics that the organizations can use when dealing with this change. One is the education and communication, in which you try to communicate the employees and you try to educate them that by gathering the data, by showing making the presentations to the employees and showing them that showing them the trends, showing them the graphs, and bringing in them or educating them about the necessity for change, right? And when you are, of course, every year educating and communicating with the employees, we should tell them that how this change is important, not only for the organization but for those employees themselves, how if they don't they don't respond to the desired change, how it will affect their jobs and how it will affect their lives, right? So it should not only be the employees, they should not be given this message that this change is important for the shareholder value or for the profits of the organization or for the dividends of the organization, but it should also have its spillovers for the other stakeholders in the organization, such as the employees, such as the customers. So unless and until employees, they feel that that change is consequential for them as well, or it will have its influences for them as well, they won't be they may not be much responsive towards that change. Then the participation. If you involve the employees in the change process, put in front of them the problem and ask their participation, ask their different possibilities, different options from them, and involve them in the change process. If you will involve them, they will tend to identify more with the change actions and the change process, and then that might be more successful. But here the caution that the managers, they need to take is that that the employees who are being involved in this change process, they are all knowledgeable on the problem, because if they are not knowledgeable enough on the problem, they might bring in the wrong options, they might influence decision making. They might influence wrong decision making, right? So that caution needs to be taken. So when we are talking about participation, we assume that the employees, they have the necessary knowledge to take part in the whole process. Then the facilitation and support. The managers, they need to ensure the employees about their support by ways of the skill development of the employees. So if their old skills are getting obsolete and they need to learn new skills to adapt to that change, so there should be the training and the skills provision by the management that should be ensured to the employees, right? Then the procedural fairness, of course, in the whole process should be there. If the employees, they perceive that the fair procedures are not used while coming up to that change, then they may be resistant to change. Manipulation and the co-option is another option that can be used by the managers for reducing this resistance to change. So in manipulation, what they do is that the manager, for example, asking his employees that if you won't act in this desired way or in this desired new way, then we'll be shutting down this plant. So by giving this, by saying this, or the employees, they might start responding to that change, right? Actually the manager does not intend to, or actually he won't shut down that plant, but he's just trying to manipulate the facts and figures and manipulating the situation to gain the favorable outcomes or to gain the favorable responses from the employees. So that is manipulation. And the co-optation is when a particular the resistant group leader, he is given the main or the key responsibility to bring in that change, right? So what you're doing here is that you're not asking that leader of the resistant group to bring in new options or new ideas of what to do and how to change, but you are giving him this responsibility, or you're just endorsing him in that change initiative, and by that way you are gaining his yes or go ahead thing from him as well, right? So this the co-optation is then basically a combination of manipulation and participation, and this type of strategy to reduce the resistance to change, it is successful, or it is comfortable, or it is good for the managers because it is very low cost and it can be very effective as well. But managers, they need to be aware that if the employees or the resistant group, they get to know the intentions of the management, then this kind of strategy can backfire, and the managers, they can lose their credibility to zero. Then selecting people who accept change. Of course, as I told you, that some people, they are more adaptive, they are more responsive to change, they are more it is part of their personality that they are more open to change, right? So for that kind of individuals who are more flexible and open to change, the organizations, they should have their selection procedures in which they can screen out the applicants who are not that open and who are resistant to change or who are risk averse, right? So that can also significantly help the organization to carry on their change initiatives when as and when required, without any resistance from the employees. Coercion is also a possibility. That is, as I gave you the example, that the manager saying that if he'll be shutting down the operations if the employees do not respond to the change. So here in coercion, manager actually means that he gives the threats to the employee, and he actually will shut down the operations if it is not done, or he is linking doing certain activity with the certain punishments if they are not done, such as the demoting the employees, transferring them from one unit to the other, from one location to the other, and so on. As I told you earlier, that there is certain politics involved, because the individuals at the different levels, they try to also safeguard their vested interests. They have expertise in certain areas, they have access to certain resources, they have certain favorable resource allocations, and which they fear that they might be gone as a result of the change. So there is certain political activity and the political decision making as well, and the politics plays a very major role in bringing the change initiatives in the organization and in bringing the changes in the organization. So the managers, especially who are at the highest level, they are not in favor of bringing in the radical changes, but they might keep on bringing the incremental changes in the organizations. Then the Lewin's three-step change model, it basically distinguishes between the unfreezing, the refreezing, and the movement stage. So it says that when you have to bring in a change in the unfreezing state, you change efforts to overcome the pressure of both individual resistance and group conformity, right? And so that is the first stage, in which when you want to bring in some change, there are certain resistance factors that the individuals have. There are certain reservations, there are certain security problems, and the other issues or the other resistance to change factors that we discussed earlier, they are there. You need to unfreeze those factors. That is the first step in order to bring the change. So you need to reduce the reservations of the employees, you need to give them assurances, you need to make sure or make the employees, or you need to convince the employees that all their reservations or all their fears, they are wrong, and nothing wrong will happen, nothing wrong will go, and the organization support is with them, the management support is with them, or you try to remove their reservations, right? So that is that stage of unfreezing. And after you're done with unfreezing, you move to the new equilibrium, to a new situation, which is the desired state, right? You move to that state, and then is the refreezing. When you have moved to that state, then you need to refreeze that. In that state, you need to stabilize that change in that state, and that stabilization, the interventions that you use to stick to the new equilibrium, there should be some interventions that you use to stick to that new equilibrium, because if you won't tend to, or if you won't use those interventions to tend to stick in that equilibrium for a longer period of time, there will be tendency for the employees to again move back to the old state of equilibrium, right? So these are refreezing and stabilizing a change intervention by balancing driving and restraining forces. So we have two forces. One are the driving forces, which are forcing the direct behavior away from the status quo, and the restraining forces, which are forces that hinder movement from the existing equilibrium. Right? So here we have an example of an oil company, not a hotel, in the US, which attempted to consolidate operations from it had its operations in the three units or in the three cities, the Seattle, the Los Angeles and San Francisco, and it wanted to consolidate its operations by closing down its units both in Seattle and Los Angeles, and wanted to move to San Francisco. So this change it required the movement of around 150 employees from those two units to San Francisco. So that was a big challenge for this company. So how it unfreezed in the first stage, what it did was that it called on all those 150 employees and had the managers. They had the meetings with those employees, resisting to their listening to their restraining forces, such as their children going to the schools in those cities, right? And their relationships with their co-workers, their managers, their houses, their own houses in those cities, how they will have to sell those cities, those houses, and how they will have to relocate, and their children, adjustment problems of their children, and their own adjustment problems. These are all the restraining forces. And then so what you do is that on one hand you and all the different fears, the different anxiety of unknown and the fear of unknown that we discussed earlier, and the other psychological issues, that insecurities that the individuals and those employees have. So you call in a meeting with those employees, try to address those issues, and the driving forces can be the forces that attract the employees towards a new situation. So what this oil firm or this oil company could do in this case was that to offer the employees the additional and the fringe benefits much more than they are getting now, such as they offer them all the relocation costs, right, and also offer them some bonuses or offer them some increments in their salary for some time, and this kind of benefits. And you could also offer them mortgage options for their house on a very low rates. So this kind of options you could offer those. So they will be the driving forces, right, which will direct the behavior away from the status quo and towards the new equilibrium. So as we can see here, that the restraining forces, they are they move you towards status quo, and the driving forces, they move you away from status quo towards the desired state. So in this situation that we discussed, that these are the different driving forces that can be given to the individual, and then the individual or the employees, once they accept those conditions and those driving forces, and then they move to the new position, in this case the San Francisco. So when they move to the new position, to the new equilibrium, they start their jobs at the new place, then you need to refreeze that situation, right? Because otherwise the employees have the tendency, quite for some period of time, to move back to the earlier positions, or to the earlier cities, or to the somewhere else, and maybe they might be still thinking of quitting those jobs and moving back to their old jobs, right? And moving back to their old cities and find some new jobs, right, etc., and a number of other possibilities. So here you need to refreeze that. You can refreeze that by making the permanent increase in their salary, for example, right? So that can be a good incentive for the employees if you give them an increased salaries, and that can be an incentive for the employees to keep working with the organization, and that behavior that can be reinforced unless and until they stabilize in that new equilibrium position. Cotter again gives us some 8-step plan for implementing change, and these are similar to the 3 steps that were given by Lewin, but they are more detailed and they are more spread. I quickly go through them. They are all self-explanatory and very detailed. So establish a sense of urgency by creating a compelling reason for why change is needed. Then you form a coalition with enough power to lead the change. Create a new vision to direct the change and strategies for achieving the vision. Then you communicate the vision throughout the organization. Empower others to act on the vision by removing barriers to change and encouraging risk-taking and creating problem-solving. Plan for change and reward short-term wins that move the organization toward the new vision. Then you consolidate the improvements, reassess changes, and make necessary adjustments in the new programs. Then you reinforce the changes by demonstrating the relationship between the new behaviors and organizational success. Action research is basically when it is a change process which is based on systematic collection of data and then selection of a change action based on what the analyzed data indicates. So there are a number of benefits in the of this action research. One, it is more problem focused rather than solution centered, because let's first discuss the steps that are involved in this action research. First one is the diagnosis, where you try to diagnose what the problem is. You do your surveys, you do your feedback analysis, you take your feedback from the employees, you do the surveys, you interview the employees, and you try to identify what are the different problems that are being faced in the organization, right? Or you try to identify the problem. Then you try to analyze the problem of your after you have collected data or made the interviews. You have all the data with you, and then you try to analyze that data and you try to screen out what are the different problems, what are the priority areas, what are the problem areas, and so on, and the definition of the problem, etc. Right? So you analyze that problem. Then in the third step, you discuss that problem or you discuss these first two steps with the employees and seek their feedback on the problems that have been identified, that what the employees have to say, how to deal with that problem, how to devise their strategy, their action plan to deal with that problem. And in that problem, fourth step, after taking the feedback from the employees, you initiate the action, right? And the employees, they are then supposed to bring that feedback into action in order to address the problem. And then the fifth stage is the evaluation. You evaluate that how far or how well you have done and where the changes they need to take. So here, from this step, for a process of action research, we get to know that it is also a scientific process, but herein the involvement of people is a lot, right? And it is very much problem focused. You first just try to understand what the problem is, and then you come up with the solution, compared to the other solution centered approaches, wherein you first give a solution like teamwork, process reengineering, and then you try to see that what are the different problems that this solution can address, or this can be the solution for. So therein you start the other way. And of course there is heavy involvement of employees in all the different steps, as we can see in the action research. So as a result, there is it can reduce the resistance to change to a significant extent. Organizational development is basically a collection of planned interventions built on humanistic democratic values that seeks to improve organizational effectiveness and employee well-being. So there are a number of values on which this organizational development is based. One is the respect for people. That is the people, they should be respected, they should be treated with respect, and then there should be trust and support in the organization. There should be cohesiveness. There should be in the organization between the different units and the intra-unit as well. Then the power equalization. There should not be any hierarchical or authority or the control kind of situations in the organization. The power should be distributed equally among all the members in the organization. So concept of the flatter organizations. Then the confrontation, which says that we should confront the problems. We should not hide the problems. And then the participation. Take the participation of the employees, increase their participation in the organizational processes and the organizational decision making. There are a number of techniques that organizational development uses, the number of interventions to gain the desired effectiveness and the desired behavior of the employees, right? One is the sensitivity training. Herein what you do is that you form the different groups which need to be trained and whose behavior need to be changed, and these groups are basically informal. They meet together, they make certain observations, they observe the different behavior, the different ways of doing things, different possibilities, they interact with each other, they share each other's experiences, and then they learn through them. So that is the informal learning. Basically there is a moderator who is a professional and a skillful person, but he does not part this professional training to these people, but he just moderates them, and he only they need to learn from each other and their experiences informally. Survey feedback approach, as we have discussed it many times, that herein you are taking the information, or you're taking the data from the employees on a number of areas, such as their satisfaction issues, their commitment and loyalty issues, other problems, other the decision making process process of the organization, and other communication effectiveness in the organization, communication channels used in the organization. So in a number of areas you take feedback from the employees, and then you identify what are the different problems and how they can be solved. Process consultation is when an external consultant, it helps the managers to devise the processes more effectively with which the change can be brought in the organization. And then we have this team building. Herein what happens is that there is high interaction among the team members, so it is basically work through teams, right? And for gaining better results. So there is of course there are certain activities that take place in the team, such as the goal and priority setting, then developing interpersonal relationships among the team members, the trust among the team members, and the cohesiveness of the team and the group. They are all important. Then the role analysis to each member's role and responsibilities, who will perform what, right? And the role analysis of each member, right? Then the intergroup development. Of course, we know that in an organization there is not only one group, but there are a number of groups, and those groups, they can develop conflicts with each other, because those groups, they might be competing with each other. They might be they might be competing on the basis of the resource allocations of the organization, right? On the if one group, whichever group will perform better, will get more access to the resources, and there can be a number of issues, because their tasks, they are most of the time, they might be interdependent, and especially when the interdependence is more between the groups, then the conflicts are also expected to rise between those groups. Intergroup problem solving can be done through a number of steps, such as groups, they should independently develop the list of participants, share and discuss those lists, look for causes and misperceptions, and work to develop integrative solutions, right? So each group is asked to develop its own list of how they perceive the other group, and then they share those lists with each other, and they see that where the perceptions are mismatching, where the wrong perceptions have been developed and why they have been developed, right? And this is how you can mutually solve that kind of problems through way of intergroup processes. Then there are contemporary change issues for today's managers. How are changes in technology affecting the work lives of employees? What can managers do to help their organizations become more innovative? How do managers create organizations that continually learn and develop? And is managing change culture bound? So these are the different contemporary issues that the managers today face, and they need to ask themselves. Of course, the improvement as a result of the change in the technology, we discussed a lot on this earlier, that how this technology, it is both a challenge and it is both an opportunity for the organization, and how the organizations, they need to continually improve and they need to respond to this technology changes. Of course, innovation is one of the factors through which the organizations can respond to this contemporary changes. And innovation is a new idea applied to initiating or improving a product, process or service. There are different sources of innovation. One is the structural variables, such as the organic cultures. The more flatter the organizational culture is, the more flexible it is, and the more creative and innovative problem solving room is there in that organizational structure. Then the managers who have long tenure in the organization, because they are more familiar with the different processes in the organization and the different ways things can be improved. They have much better understanding of the organization and the different nitty-gritties in the organization. Therefore, they are the people who can bring in more ideas, and they can be more innovative, and they can be more problem solving, right? And the more organization resource, the more resources the organization has, the more it would be easier for the organization to encourage the risk taking and to encourage bringing in new ideas. It would have more room to assimilate and to absorb more errors made by the employees. Therefore, it will be more that organization would tend to be more innovative as a result of more and more resources it has. Then the inter-unit communication. The more inter-unit communication is there, the more organization is going to be innovative, right? So the organizations that have that are more based around the concept of task forces and the cross-functional work teams, they tend to be more innovative. Then of course the organization's culture. The more the culture is innovative and more it encourages the risk taking, the creative problem solving, the proactive approach on the part of the employees, the more it encourages it does not penalizes the making of the mistakes, right? The more the employees they are innovative and creative. And of course the human resources, they are important. What is the combination, what is the formulation of the human resources in the organization? Are they really innovative and creative? Do they have that creative potential, and are they risk taking, and are they open to change or not? And then the idea champions, they're the individuals who take an innovation and actively and enthusiastically promote the idea, build support, overcome resistance, and ensure that the idea is implemented. And the transformational leaders, they tend to show this characteristic of being idea champions. Learning organization, of course, we know that it is an organization that has developed the continuous capacity to adapt to change. So learning organization is basically how you create it. It is basically a double loop learning when we talk about the learning organization. Herein, compared to the single loop learning, wherein errors, when they occur in the organization, they are corrected using the past routines and present policies. But in the case of a learning organization, if any errors or omissions they occur in the organization, they are corrected not by way of using the how it was being dealt with in the past and what are the policies of the organization, but the status quo is changed, the current assumptions, they are challenged, and the organization, it tends to modify its policies and its objectives and standard procedures or the standard routines, that as a result of which that error occurred, and they are changed. So how you create a learning organization? One, you establish a strategy towards learning, right? And so you establish a strategy of being more innovative, being more supportive of the new ideas, and being more creative. You develop that strategy, you establish that strategy, and then you reshape the organization's culture to match with that strategy, and you also redesign the organization's structure to match that strategy. So for example, if you have a very mechanistic and very bureaucratic culture, and you're establishing a strategy which is encouraging innovation, then there is not a match between your strategy and structure, and then the learning organization cannot be flourished, or it cannot be created. So we'll be discussing more about this strategy, more about this structure, and how strategy needs to match the structure in our next lecture. So there are different options that are available to the management when it comes to the managing resistance to change, and we discussed all of them earlier. We also discussed that what are the different factors that are what are the different fears of the employees to respond to the change. So we also discussed that these different strategy options. One is a forced change strategy. You just give the orders to the employees and ask them to do so. And we also discussed that how it can encourage the low commitment and morale when you are not participating, getting the employees participated, when you're not making them show that how it is important to do certain thing in one way, or how it is important to change. So as a result, the employees will have low morale and low motivation. The other one is the educative change strategy. We discussed that, educate the employees towards why it is important to do it. Then rational or self-interest strategy, wherein attempts to convince that changes to self-interest of the employee, right? We discussed these. There are a number of concerns that the managers they have, such as the production processes. They typically constitute more than 70% of the firm's total assets, and the decisions depend on plant size, the inventory control, quality control, cost control, and technological innovation. So then we have this an example of a hospital adding a cancer center, which is product development, for which you need to purchase the specialized equipment. So for a hospital, if it wants to enter into the product development by adding a cancer center, what it requires is that it requires the purchase of specialized equipment, and so this is the kind of a change that the organization wants to bring in. And in order to implement that change, it has the challenges for implications for the behavior of the employees as well, that how they would respond to this bringing in of the specialized equipment, whether they'll be needing some new workforce, new employees they will be need to hiring, or they will have to use the existing employees, and what about the matching of the skills of those employees to the requirements of the new job, and so on. Then for the bank, adding 10 new branches, which is market development, you have to perform the site location analysis and what are the implications of this kind of change for the organization. Then there are a number of human resource concerns, that how you need to match your HR system with the organizational climate, how you need to match the context, how you need to assess the staff needs and costs and develop the performance incentives, different childcare policies that you may need to offer to the employees, and the work-life balance issues. Then there are a number of marketing concerns as well, such as the internet marketing. It may be more effective, market segments that are easy to identify and most time spent on net. Then effective strategy implementation may come from instant messaging and chatting with customers, social interaction, building social interaction and rapport with customers instead of self-focus on attract and consume. Consumer shift from want to need. So then there are a number of finance and accounting concerns as well, such as the debt equity ratio, how it is going to be affected to lease or buy the fixed assets, right? If you need to purchase the assets, whether you need to buy them or you need to lease them. And then accounts receivable and payables, how you're going to deal with that, right? And then the discount on accounts, whether you will be giving the discounts to your suppliers or you will be giving the discount to your customers, and what will be the percentage of that discount, what will be the amount of cash on hand. Then the research and development concerns, that how you need to emphasize on the product development or the process improvements, such as the university researchers or the private sector researchers. Then use of money on research and development, right? And whether you will be first mover or you'll be imitator. So all these strategies, all these strategic initiatives, all these changes in the organization, in all these different departments, in all these different areas, there are implications. So they are just a few examples in all those areas that I have picked for you to understand that how the different units and the different functions of that the organization is performing, how in those areas the firms, the managers, they can have different challenges when it comes to the bringing in a change, when they want to do this market development, when they want to do the product development, how they need to bring in different strategies, and how they need to what are the different changes that can be that those change in strategy would mean, and how the firm they needs to respond to those strategies. Right, so in all those areas, such as the research and development concerns, we see that the firm, it needs to develop its design strategy, and then it needs to see whether it wants to be the first mover or it wants to be the imitator. Because if it wants to be the first mover, then it will have to spend a different proportion, a different allocate its research and development expenses in different areas, and activities would be different than if it wants to be the imitator. Then there are a number of MIS concerns. So effective MIS for change implementation, that is very important, that you need to collect the information, a good information collection process, the storage and retrieval process that should be there. Then the reduced cost by quick processing of information, and direct communication with value network, so that you are not left out on one area, and you are in very good coordination and communication with all the different actors that are involved in the value network. So you need to have a very strong management information system to implement that change. So this was all our discussion for today. We discussed the different forces of change. We discussed the different factors that are involved in the resistance to change, how the management can overcome those resistance to change. Then we discussed the different approaches towards the managing change, and then we had a discussion on the contemporary issues in the change management, such as the firms, they can bring changes by way of innovations, and by way of innovative cultures, and by way of the learning organization, by way of adopting the characteristics of the learning organization. And then we discussed that how there can be different concerns in the different departments within the organization when it comes to change, what the implications of those different concerns. We had a very brief look at that. So they were just kind of examples and different ideas for you to think that how in these different departments activities, they are different, and how different changes can affect these departments, not only these but the other departments, the inter-unit change. Of course, as we saw earlier, that the change it has to be inter-unit. Then what are the implications for these departments of the different changes that can occur in the organization as a result to change in the external environment or change in the strategy of the organization. So with this, I conclude, I come up to an end of this lecture, and I see you again. Thank you for your patient hearing.